What is good, guys? It's your boy Chalito Suave here with another video. Welcome to Suave City for all things rock and R&B. I typically like to help you guys out and train you and help you get the thing you want to do in Studio One done, because that's my new DAW home. There was a video I posted the other day that got a lot of heat, and I'll be honest, I was a bit of a prick on the video the way I delivered it. I was just annoyed and infuriated because it's something so simple and people just argue and argue and argue. And I made this video and it was like 45 minutes long because one of you guys really ticked me off because you're like, you're talking out of your ass and you need to read a book, which I have a ton of books. So please tell me which book you would like me to read, because I have more than enough. I've studied them for, why am I going to this British accent? I have more than enough. I've studied for my audio certification back there. So I was like, okay, let me delete this. Let me start this all over when I come back from work. And so I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, so what is the actual issue? Why are we telling you to do the correct thing and you're fighting it? And having NeuroDSP themselves come out and tell you to leave it at 0, and if your interface is too hot when it's at 0, to gain it down or turn off instrument level and then gain it up till it's at the right point. Um, that was weird for my ears. My phone was sending EMI to my in-ears. Um, so NeuroDSP released this, and they're basically saying keep your preamp gain on your interface at 0, and or at negative 13 dB FS, which means sometimes you need to gain it down. So like technically, I don't own any NeuroDSP, but if I owned one, I would have to gain it down because of my Evo 16 is adding gain when I hit instrument level. Someone said that, and that is true. It does. It's adding some gain. Actually, a significant amount for my guitar input. That's why on my plugin that I showed on the last video, you see the input down a little bit. But I didn't want to just come on here and rant and just like get angry at you for not knowing, because like, at the end of the day, we're all guitar players. We're all love music, and like we should just get along and like try to help each other out. So whenever we're in a topic like this, I just want to try to keep it friendly, even though sometimes I get irritated. I'm human, whatever. But why is it when we even have the people telling you who make the stuff that you're using, telling you you're using it wrong? What is it that makes you so strongly favoring a different idea? Um, so I started thinking, okay, what is the issue with social media and like YouTube, and people putting information on there, and then people getting angry about the information they're putting on? Um, I really started thinking about it, and the thing that I came up with is the fact that we have multiple generations of people, and some people are using outdated gear. So my thing is, if we think about the idea of a mountain, right? And when you're a beginner, you just see a giant mountain, and it's scary, and that could be recording and stuff. And then an intermediate student starts to learn all the parts of the mountain. An advanced student knows all the part of the mountain, but the master has to see a mountain at the end of the day. So when I tell you just to hit the instrument level and leave it be, I'm not adding the extra little details and going this into depth because I already know it, and it's just I have to break down my knowledge to get to that. And I did not do that in the last video, so I apologize. So if we want to get into the nitty gritty, yes, if you have a modern interface and you hit instrument level, it's adding gain, and you don't have to do anything, for the most part. If you're using NeuroDSP, I would follow what they're saying and leave it at negative 13 dB FS. They are not gaslighting you. That is literally how they do it. Because if you think about it, NeuroDSP is a modern company. Okay, they are using modern techniques and to create modern solutions for recording. So what does that mean? If I, as a guitar player, use NeuroDSP, I'm most likely in their head gonna be on the latest interface. They are not expecting their users to be using outdated gear, because they are a new age company. Most of the people who are using outdated gear probably don't own NeuroDSP. That is probably what their marketing team is thinking. And so when they say this, because they know the Evo 16, any Focusrite, they know all these new age. You see the Apogee Duet. You see that if like I said, if you do Apogee, you could just hit it and be done. But according to this, you have to even gain it lower. So you might want to turn off instrument level and gain up to 14.5. And it's not going to respond necessarily the same way because it's still not as hot as if it was an instrument level. So that's another thing. So I think if we're going to say one size fits all would be incorrect, I think the best way to look at this, if you are using an external preamp that's like 1,000 series or a 500 series, analog equipment, then you hit instrument line and you will gain up. That's how those operate. That's kind of what our preamps on our amps are doing. Okay, but and if you are on an outdated equipment, so if you're in an outdated interface that's like possibly not even supported anymore, then you should gain up as well accordingly, right? Obviously, don't clip it. I don't think you guys are clipping the signal. I don't believe you guys are clipping the signal. You guys are all intelligent. You know what you're doing as far as how to set the gain. All right. I think that's the issue. We have different generations of people using different generations of equipment, and so you're using an outdated tech, and so you need to gain up. Because if you're basically, I think we should say this: if your interface adds gain to your instrument level, then you're probably fine to leave it alone. Which, by the way, if you watched this guy's video where he says amp SIMS and input gain, please stop the madness, and he tells you to gain up, he also did pin in his comments, which I applaud him for this, saying that a lot of people have asked how I determine the amount of gain I add in with He does say in the comments that he has to admit that he used multiple different interfaces, number one, and number two, that most modern interfaces you don't actually have to do anything. He actually admits that he tricked you in order to pull off what he was trying to do. So I was trying to follow the process that would be easy for others to copy. Most people don't have signal generators and scopes lying around in their home and studio like me, although I'm actually working on bringing an affordable signal generator to market. So for this purpose, stay tuned for the video. Okay, but anyways, there was one comment. He pinned it. It's basically saying that he kind of cheated it. He used different interfaces to achieve this video. And so eventually he does say, if you have a modern interface, just leave it at 0. You're fine. So if you are an outdated interface, man, there's a lot of replies to the thing. But anyways, if you are in an outdated interface, go ahead and hit that and gain up. But NeuroDSP is not expecting you to be on an outdated interface or on a 500 series using their equipment. Most of their users are probably also using a NeuroDSP, multi-effects unit. Most of their users you would expect are fanboys and would be using their stuff. And even on that, they do say if you're using our multi-effects unit, leave it at literal like 0 input level on 0 on the quad cortex. So if you're using NeuroDSP, I would say follow that. That makes sense to me. And once again, it's basically leaving at 0, which is what I was telling you to do. So if you're an older folk with an outdated equipment, then do you, right? You do you, man. Now, so what we should say to each other is, if your interface adds gain when you hit instrument level or the high Z, because they're basically the same thing, then don't gain up. But if it doesn't, gain accordingly. Okay. Now, about the other things, you guys are confused about what gain actually is, and I want to explain it in a bare bones simple way. One way I can demonstrate it is like my mic, right? Even though they're not the same thing, gain does the same thing no matter to what. Gain is gain. Gain is about sensitivity. And actually, I have a picture of an amp. It's a clean amp that I sometimes use to teach. And it has no gain. It's only volume. okay? Because it's doing is boosting the output of my guitar. It's not gonna saturate. It's not gonna do anything, because gain is compression. Okay, gain is not compression, actually. It's the wrong word. Gain is bringing whatever is there closer. So it's like, for example, if I put this mic further away, and right now I'm very low. Okay, if I want this to pick me up better, I'm gonna have to gain up my interface so that I can reach it at basically a decent level. So that's pretty hot. Okay, it's like at 32. This is not the way you would run this mic because it's a dynamic mic. It's meant to be really close up. This is why when people use an SM7B, they go, oh, it's gain heavy. Well, no, you just need to learn how to use the mic. It's supposed to be used like this, a little bit closer to your face. It's a dynamic microphone. It's meant for cancellation, which brings me to my next thing, okay? So, like I said, this gain, there's like a cloud, okay? So the higher you put it, the more sensitive whatever's in front of it becomes, okay? So if I gain up, my mic's going to become more sensitive. If you gain up on your guitar amp, the more sensitive your pickups are going to be. That's why really high gain tones, we have to throw a gate on them because you're like, touch it like just slightly, and all of a sudden it's just making noise. If you've ever passed a guitar to someone's like, yo, this thing is sensitive. This amp is sensitive because it's a high gain amp. It just like you touch it, it just makes noise. And part of that reason is because in order to get a high gain sound, there is the gain filter has compression on it. So I'm going to kind of show you this because some of you guys didn't know that compression is distortion. So here I clipped the crap out of my mic and I compressed it. So take a listen. This is literally this same mic.
Yeah, what's good? How you guys doing today? This is an example of how distortion.
Oh, I have this other guitar track under there.
Yeah, what's good? How you guys doing today?
That's just gaining the microphone as hard as possible. So, as you see, if you look at the waveform of this, okay, this is where we get overdrive from, like like clipping an analog signal. You'll see when you clip any signal, it will distort, number one, and then it will start to compress. That's why it's like a block, okay? So if you use any sort of distortion, it's gonna have compression in it. When you overdrive a signal of any sort, it will eventually compress. So when you record, next time you record your guitar, if you're using any high gain, and then you commit that audio, because a lot of you guys aren't committing your audio in, so you wouldn't see this. But when you bounce that audio out, pay attention to the waveform. I guarantee you it looks like this, especially if you're using high gain. It's gonna look like this. It's compressed signal. In fact, like I said on the comments, if you listen to Black Dog by Led Zeppelin, it is 3 LA2As stacked on top of each other. It is not a distortion pedal, and it's actually not amp distortion either. It's actually the LA2A just stacked on top of each other, one on top of another. So that's where distortion comes from. That's another thing that people were mistaken about. So when you tell me, oh yeah, it doesn't boost your signal, it does. In order to do this, you have to be able to compress the signal and distort at the same time. So especially for fuzz, it's compression, like extreme compression. One of my favorite tricks when I'm mixing is instead of reaching for a compressor, if I know I want the kick to be fat, I just throw a fuzz on it. Try it. It's a really cool trick. You'll get your kick to be really fat without even like having to do a lot of compression, because you're doing a lot of compression, but it's like quick because you've already have something that's heavy compression. So that's clarifying that, right? So what was the other thing? Oh, conversion. Someone said that if you oh, well, before we get to that, because we're talking about gain and all that, notice how when I stepped away and then I gained up, it was able to pick me up, and the sensitivity of it became more evident. Well, one thing you have to also understand with a noise floor, okay, this is why I said you cannot gain up and decrease your noise floor, is because a noise floor isn't just preamp noise, especially when we're talking about microphones. But noise floor can be EMI. If you've ever picked up your phone while playing the guitar and it put it next to a wire, go this is like dot thing. Um, the higher the gain is, the more susceptible it is to interference and all that stuff. So we typically throw a gate on it to help. But even if I lower the volume, that noise floor will still be there. It doesn't do anything with the noise floor. It's like if I got closer to a bear, because like I said, gain is bringing things that are far away closer. So if it's already close, you're going to start to distort that signal. That's what gain does. So we bring the volume down so we're not distorting the signal. Um, but now it allows me to speak at the same volume, and you think I've like raised my volume, my voice. It picks me up better, basically. Um, so like I said, gain is perceived loudness, so meaning it's a deception. It's supposed to deceive you to make you think that it's recording louder, or it's louder than it is. Right? It's still the same volume. You just picked up that low volume by gaining up the mic and being able to pick up something. So if I use a mic and I gain up too loud, it's gonna introduce bleed from the background. So the more you gain up, the higher the noise floor gets. Because if there's dogs or whatever in the background, if you gain up your mic, if you gain up anything, it will pick that up. And even if you lower the volume, when you get to the mixing stage, if you have to boost, it's gonna reappear. So you cannot increase your gain and lower your noise floor. It's impossible. Because even if I, in a live scenario, were to gain up and turn my volume down, the cloud of the gain still remains. The cloud of the gain still remains. All I've done is lower the output, okay? Because now I'm still trying to get the same amount of level. I just want to be able to pick him up better. So the cloud of gain from the microphone is still the same regardless of where I put the volume. They are separate of each other. So if you want a low noise floor, you want to have less gain. That's why people use cloud lifters in the first place, because they're putting their mic too far away, then they're gaining it up a lot, which introduces a lot more preamp noise, okay? And so if you're gaining it up a lot, what ends up happening, right? If you're gaining it up a lot, then that means that you're going to introduce more noise. Then you want to go tune your room and all that stuff, all because you just didn't use your mic correctly. But cloud lifters aren't necessarily a bad thing. They're great for old ribbon microphones. That's why they made them. There's a whole interview with the guys of Cloud on HMD. You should check it out. And he talks about the development of the company, and it was all focused on ribbon microphones. In fact, they make their own ribbon microphones. So, yeah, you cannot get a low noise floor by gaining up. You're only going to bring it up. Even if you bring the volume down, the sensitivity that you've set is still there. So it's still going to pick up everything, whether you're using a mic or guitar. Now, in guitar terms, it might not be it's probably not as big of a deal because it's not like a microphone, right? It kind of is, but it isn't. Because you could obviously play music from your phone on your pickups and it picks it up. We all know that, but it's really because the strings will vibrate and then it will send it to the pickup. Because the strings in this case, if you've ever opened up an SM58, it's got a spring on it. So that spring is what transmits the audio. So in this case, when you put your phone to a pickup and it starts picking it up, it's because it's sending vibrations to the strings, and the strings acts as the spring that then turns the pickups microphonic. That's just kind of how that works. So yeah, I think that's everything that we kind of were bashing our heads around on my comment section there. So once again, I apologize for my tone, but I was not wrong about 90% of the things. But you guys were correct somewhat about preamps. This thing does add gain when I hit the input monitor. But like I said, I think if we're going to go on forward, just so we can all be nice to each other, let's just remember, if you have outdated equipment, most likely what you're hearing people say, if they're on a modern interface, doesn't apply to you. If you're on a 500 series or 1000 series, it doesn't apply to you. And I think the only other thing I would like to reiterate is that if you do boost up more than is necessary on your preamp with a guitar, you are throwing a boost pedal in front of your amp. That is the best way I could describe it. Because one of you guys said, well, you gain up your amp, but the gain on your interface is the wrong thing to gain. Okay, if we look at this right here, they're telling you to gain up on the actual plugin, and that's the same for any plugin you pull up. So if I pull up, I can't pull up Guitar Rig 7 right now because my SSD is right here. Actually, this is where all my plugins are. Oh my gosh, I'm dropping my extra screen. I use my iPad as an extra screen. Oh yeah, I almost forgot conversion because I just saw this SSD. So I'm gonna explain it using a camera, because you can't. Your gain doesn't really affect your SSD, and I want to kind of explain it with a camera. Okay, so or your SSD, your gain can affect your conversion, and I want to explain conversion using a camera. Okay, so if you look at a camera, the lens is like your interface, and the body is like your computer. Okay, now your body can either have a like a digital shutter. This one has a digital shutter, or it can have an analog shutter, which it literally shutters like that, which my Canon T3i would do that. This one's a lot faster. So that would be the equivalent of like a hard drive to an SSD. Now, if you look up any camera lenses, they all have a rating. Okay, so this would be equivalent to your conversion rating on your interface. So let me pull up like camera lenses. I'll just look up Panasonic because that's what I have, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me. I need to buy that. So we're gonna flip this over. So this is camera lenses. So if we're talking about conversion, if you look at the F rating right here, f4.5, f6.3, f2.8, you could see this as the conversion rate of the lens. Okay, and then you have your write and read speed on your camera. So depending on whether or not you have an actual physical shutter or a digital shutter, it can change the response time. Because now one thing has to move, the other one's digital, it's really fast. So what all that to say is, in order to take advantage of your fast, your better converters, you're gonna need at least an SSD, because the SSD is what's taking care of the writing and reading, right? So the best way I can say this is, even if if we're talking about signal, the equivalent of bad signal on a camera would be like taking an unfocused shot. So if I don't even worry about this, like that, by the way, that rating has to do without autofocus, because if the autofocus is on, it takes a little bit longer. It was actually, I held the button before, but if I unfocus it and then just hold the thing, am I on autofocus? Oh no, it's off. I have to turn it back on. Okay, so if I hold the button, it'll focus on something, and then it'll take the picture. It takes a little bit longer. But if I put it on manual focus, it doesn't matter if it's in focus or not. I can just point it and shoot it. That's what the rating is for. So if there's any automation, anything like that, your conversion will be tanked a little bit. That's why when you have auto tune on, you'll notice a huge delay, because it starts to doing something on its own, right? And that's very heavy on the computer. So in this case, when I'm doing autofocus, it's heavier on the computer, so it takes a little bit longer. Just like your computer can overheat, the camera body can overheat. So what are your options, right? Like what is it that actually matters when it comes to conversion? Well, regardless of whether or not I take a bad shot or a focused shot, it does not change how long it takes for me to take the picture. Obviously, if it takes me forever to focus, that might be the time it takes. But a badly focused shot. So if I get this in focus, so let me put it here just to make it easier on myself, and then put it in manual focus. Now it's in focus, and I take the shot. It's fast. But if I unfocus it and take the shot again, it's still fast. So that's exactly how your converters work. It doesn't matter if you're sending it bad audio or good audio, the conversion is the conversion. The only way to change it is if you go into your DAW, and then you change, so if you go to the playback engine, you start changing the sample rates, you start changing um, the buffer size and stuff. That will change the way it will react. If you want, for example, another thing you were asking about is the difference. Why wouldn't you say resolution for the waveform? What word would you use to describe the final waveform and the quality of it? I would consider that word to be fidelity. Okay, so if we're thinking about terms of that, um, if you think about your, you can set 44.1, 48 to 96, and in some cases you can get to like a hundred something hertz of snapshots. I think the equivalent of that in a camera would be like, there's a difference between 8K, 4K, and 1080p. So like 8K would be like this many pixels, 4K would be this many pixels, and 1080 would be like this many pixels, right? And so, the more pixels you take, the heavier load it's going to be. So if you've ever taken your interface and set it to 96, you might find you need to go lower on the samples. So, for example, when you're doing video, it does have a bit rate, but it's not the same bit rate as we would consider in audio. The equivalent of that would be what kind of footage you're doing. You could change this to 8K. If I throw an SSD on it, I could do open gate shooting, and I can do 8K at like 30 bits per second, which would be basically like setting something to 96 kilohertz and being able to do like 126 samples per second with no delay. That would be essentially the same thing. So, what I would say is, um, if you're talking about the resolution of something, that would be the process of recording it. Okay, so if you're recording it, what is the resolution it's recording at? But then after the thing is recorded, what is the fidelity of it? So if you look at the YouTube video and you go to the gearbox, and then you change it from 4K to let's say, well, you could do like 1080, or you can drop it to like down to 480. The video will still be 4K, but you've now changed the fidelity of it so it plays easier on your computer. That's what you can do a lot of time with mixing and stuff. But you got to be careful with it because you could stretch audio, obviously. So knowing that is very important. But the fidelity is like the end result. What does it sound like when you finish recording and it's in there and you play it back? How well can it play at the resolution that you chose? So that would be the fidelity. How well does it move? Like, is your computer stuttering? Is it struggling to record that? That would be what I would consider the waveform quality after you've recorded. Resolution to me would be considering choosing which resolution you're recording at between 96, 48, and 44.1. So, once again, I've been Chili Suave City out. Hopefully, this clears up some things. Um, I, like I said, I don't want us to continue arguing. I want everybody to just kind of be able to agree on something. And I think the final thing for me to say would be, if your interface puts gain when you hit instrument level or high Z, do not gain up. And in some cases, if you're using the Neural DSP and yours is too hot, gain it down. If you are using outdated equipment, then gain up accordingly. If you're using a 500 series rack or a 1000 series rack, gain up accordingly. But your interface gain is not the same thing as your amp gain, because you don't plug a preamp in between the preamp that you're going to record into and use that preamp. So that would be like sending a preamp into a preamp. We don't do that, right? So that's why you don't typically gain up your interface if you're on if you're using a plugin, obviously, unless you're using an outdated thing where the gain is not automatically applied, gain up accordingly because you do need to send a good enough signal to it. Now, unfortunately, we do not know for all the other companies what they would suggest you to do, but my guess is because of like I was showing Ampire, which is the stock amp sound for Studio One. Whatever the look up whatever the HD8's instrument level gain is at, and just copy that because that would probably be the default for their Empire thing if you're in Studio One. I think it would be great if companies could just be more honest about these things. But like I said, uh, gain is increasing the sensitivity. Um, and then there's like um, gain staging. You do and you don't do it in the studio. You definitely do it a lot more live. Um, I think gain staging in the studio is a little bit different. If you're committing a lot on the way in, if you're typically doing the modern recording using an interfaces, you're not really doing a lot of gain staging. If you're using a channel strip, let's say like this is your channel strip. This is a whack channel strip. I don't know why you would be doing this, but let's say you're doing that like auto tuning the compression into. Let's just change this guitar amp into like an EQ and a de-esser for the SSL thing. Um, then you could kind of say that you can gain stage a little bit from each plugin at each point. Um, but typically, when we say we are gain staging, um, we're dealing with volume and gain, not just gain. And so, typically, if you are using any sort of like chain on the way in, you will do some gain staging. But if you're on a console and you're not using anything else, you typically just set the parameter where you need it to be, and then you kind of EQ and do whatever you need to do from there. And then it would depend on how it responds into Pro Tools that there you would do the volume and maybe bring it down if you find it to be too hot for Pro Tools. It's just it depends. Like it really just depends. Y- Typically, though, you would find that you could just set the gain at a good level and be done. Because if you're having to bring your volume down on a console when you're recording, tracking into Pro Tools, typically that means the gain is too high, anyways. Um, because the, I mean, you get some pros because you can get a beefy kick and bring the volume down, but still have a good signal in Pro Tools. That's the benefit of having like a console. But you know, there's like lines that you can kind of cross or not cross. Um, but yeah, hopefully that clears it up. Do you gain stage in the studio? Yes and no. Not really, unless you're doing certain workflows. I think if anybody's gonna, um, if we're talking about tracking, we're not really gain staging when we're tracking. We're typically setting the gauge where we need it, and then that's it. You especially after you've done something for a long time, you kind of know where you need your mic gain to be. If it's gonna go through this compressor and all that, you learn that. Like I know where I need my mic gain to be typically. If I'm recording into this, I haven't touched my OBS compression settings in a while, so actually that's the one case where I didn't know. Anyways, this is 34 minutes. So at least it's 10 minutes shorter than the last video that I was going to post. So, anyways, peace out.